"I'm very fertile, I will bear your child," said the giant Apache bride, and the cowboy welcomed her. The land was wide and unforgiving, stretching endlessly under a burning sun. Dust moved with the wind, settling on fences, horses, and tired men who had learned not to complain. In this land lived a cowboy named Thomas Hale. He was not famous, not rich, and not loud. People knew him as a man who worked hard, spoke little, and kept his distance. His ranch sat far from town, surrounded by dry grass and open sky. Life had taught him early that silence was safer than hope. Thomas woke before sunrise every day. He fed his horses, checked his cattle, and repaired whatever the night had damaged. He had built his life with his own hands after losing his parents young. There was no family waiting for him inside the house, only empty rooms and worn furniture. Sometimes, when the evenings were too quiet, the loneliness pressed on his chest, but he never spoke of it. In his world, men survived by enduring, not by sharing feelings. Not far from Thomas's land lived an Apache tribe that had been pushed again and again from their original homes. They had lost land, people, and peace. Among them was a woman named Ayanna. She stood taller than most women and many men. Her strength was not just physical, it was in her steady eyes and calm voice. From childhood, she had carried responsibility. She hunted, protected, and helped lead when others hesitated. Elders respected her and children followed her without fear. Ayanna understood that her people were at risk. Food was harder to find. Outsiders moved closer every year. Conflicts broke out over water and land. The tribe needed protection, alliances, and time. The elders discussed many options, but none felt right. Finally, the idea of a marriage alliance was spoken aloud. It was not a romantic thought. It was a desperate one. When Ayanna heard the elders' decision, she did not cry or protest. She listened. She knew what it meant. A union with a settler, especially a cowboy, would protect borders and bring stability. It would also mean leaving behind parts of her old life. The elders did not force her, but they looked at her with hope. She carried the strength they needed. The name Thomas Hale came up because he was known to be fair. He did not steal land. He kept his word. He had no wife, no children, and little connection to the town. He was quiet, which the elders believed meant he would not humiliate or harm her. Still, the idea of joining two such different lives felt heavy. Thomas first heard about the proposal from a trader who stopped by his ranch. The man spoke casually, as if discussing weather. "The tribe wants an alliance," he said. "They're offering a marriage." Thomas laughed once, short and sharp, thinking it was a joke. When he realized it was not, his expression changed. He had never imagined marriage, especially not under such terms. He thought of a stranger living in his house, watching him, judging him. He thought of responsibility, of change. His first instinct was to refuse. That night, Thomas sat alone on his porch, staring at the stars. He remembered how empty his house felt. He remembered how the land grew harder to manage alone each year. He also knew that refusal could bring trouble. Conflict was something he had avoided his whole life, but conflict had a way of finding people anyway. Ayanna prepared quietly. She packed only what mattered. She spoke with her mother and elders, accepting their blessings. She told herself that strength was not about comfort. It was about survival. She did not know what kind of man Thomas was, only what people said. She promised herself she would not shrink, no matter where she went. The day they met was simple. No ceremony, no crowd. Just two people standing across from each other in open land. Thomas noticed her height first, then her steady gaze. She did not look down or away. Ayanna noticed his tired eyes and rough hands. He looked like a man shaped by work and silence. They did not smile. They nodded. Words felt unnecessary. Each understood that this meeting was not about desire but about duty. Still, something unexpected happened. There was no fear, only caution and curiosity. Ayanna spoke first. Her voice was calm, clear. She did not lower her head or soften her words. She spoke honestly, explaining her role, her strength, and her willingness to build a future. She did not promise love. She promised effort, loyalty, and life. She told him plainly that she was strong and capable of bearing children, because in her world, honesty was respect. Thomas did not know how to respond. No woman had ever spoken to him like that. He felt embarrassed, surprised, and strangely respected. He realized she was not asking to be saved. She was offering partnership. He agreed, not because he felt ready, but because something inside him told him that turning away would be a mistake he would regret forever. As they rode toward his ranch together, silence followed them. But it was not empty. It was full of unspoken questions. Could two people from such different worlds share a life? Could duty turn into understanding? Neither knew the answer, but both felt that their lives had already changed. That night, under the same roof but separate spaces, Thomas lay awake listening to unfamiliar sounds. Yana sat quietly observing her new surroundings. Two lives had crossed paths not by chance but by necessity, and in that crossing the future had begun to take shape, slow, uncertain, but alive. The land outside remained the same, wide and harsh. But inside that small house something fragile had started. Not love, not yet, but possibility. Morning came quietly to the ranch, carried by soft light and the sound of wind moving through dry grass. Thomas woke early as he always did, but this morning felt different. There was another presence in the house. Even though Ayana slept in a separate room, her quiet strength seemed to fill the space. He lay still for a moment, listening, unsure how to begin a life that now included another person. Ayana woke before the sun fully rose. She had learned long ago that early mornings brought clarity. She sat up slowly, taking in the unfamiliar room. The walls were plain, the furniture simple. Nothing here carried the warmth of her tribe, but it was clean and solid. She reminded herself that comfort would come later, if at all. For now, she needed to understand this place and the man who shared it with her. When she stepped outside, Thomas was already working. He was fixing a broken fence, his movements practiced and steady. He noticed her approach but did not stop. Ayana watched him for a moment, seeing how he treated his work with patience, not anger. That told her more than words could. She did not greet him with questions or demands. Instead, she picked up a loose tool nearby and began helping without asking. Thomas paused, surprised, then nodded once and continued. No words passed between them, but something shifted. Work, at least, was a language they both understood. Their days followed a quiet pattern. Thomas handled the cattle and land. Ayana helped where she could, learning quickly, observing carefully. She cooked meals in her own way, using what little was available. At first, Thomas barely spoke during meals. He ate, thanked her, and returned to his tasks. But he noticed that the house felt less empty. The silence no longer pressed so hard. Ayana noticed his habits. He was careful with supplies. He treated animals gently. He avoided town whenever possible. She sensed a deep loneliness in him, not loud or desperate, but settled like dust in his bones. She did not try to fix it. She knew some wounds healed only when allowed to breathe. At night, they stayed in separate rooms. This was not a rule spoken aloud, but an understanding. Neither rushed what they did not understand. Ayana respected boundaries. Thomas appreciated that more than he could explain. Still, differences began to surface. Neighbors visited out of curiosity more than kindness. Some stared too long. Some spoke with forced politeness. Ayana felt their judgment but did not react. She stood tall, her presence unshaken. Thomas noticed how people changed their tone around her, unsure whether to fear or respect her. It stirred something protective in him, even though he did not yet admit it. Inside the house, small misunderstandings appeared. Ayana followed traditions Thomas did not know. Thomas expected routines Ayana had never learned. Sometimes silence stretched too long, becoming uncomfortable. Once, Thomas spoke sharply out of frustration, then immediately regretted it. Yana did not respond with anger. She simply looked at him and waited. That calm made him feel ashamed in a way no argument could. One evening, as they sat outside watching the sky turn orange, Yana spoke openly for the first time since arriving. She explained why she agreed to the marriage. She did not soften the truth. Her people needed safety. She believed alliances were built through commitment, not promises. She told him she had chosen this path willingly, not because she was weak, but because she was strong enough to carry responsibility. Thomas listened, staring at the horizon. He admitted slowly that he had never planned for a family. Life had always felt like something to survive, not build. He confessed that he feared failing her, failing any future child, failing at something that mattered this much. Saying it out loud made his chest feel lighter and heavier at the same time. Yana nodded. She told him fear was not a weakness. Avoiding responsibility was. Her words were firm but not unkind. She did not demand reassurance. She only asked for honesty. That night, Thomas realized she did not expect perfection. She expected effort. Days turned into weeks. Their movements around each other became more natural. Thomas began to ask before making decisions. Yana began to share stories from her past, short pieces at first. The house slowly filled with sound, footsteps, cooking, the occasional quiet laugh. One afternoon, Yana felt unwell. She dismissed it at first, continuing her work, but the feeling returned stronger. She sat down, breathing slowly, thinking. She understood her body well. When she told Thomas what she suspected, his reaction surprised them both. He felt fear first, sharp and sudden. Then came responsibility. He asked what she needed, not what he wanted, but what she needed. The thought of a child changed everything. It made the future real. It made choices heavier. That night, Thomas did not sleep. He walked the land thinking of protection, of shelter, of a world that was often unkind. Yana watched him quietly, understanding his worry without words. When confirmation came, there was no celebration. Only silence, thick with meaning. Yana placed her hand on her stomach, steady and calm. Thomas stood beside her, unsure where he fit but unwilling to step away. The marriage that began as survival was becoming something else. Not love yet, but respect deepening into care. The world outside still judged. The land remained harsh. But inside the small ranch house, two people were learning how to stand together. And though neither said it aloud, both understood that life would never return to what it was before. Something had taken root, fragile but determined, waiting to grow. The news slowly became part of their daily life, settling into the ranch the way dust settled on the windowsills. At first, nothing looked different. The land was still dry. The cattle still needed care. The sun still rose and fell without concern for human plans. But inside the house, every small thing carried new meaning. Thomas became more careful. He checked fences twice. He stored more food than usual. He fixed the roof even though it was not yet broken. He did not explain his actions, but Yana understood. Preparing was his way of caring. He was not a man of soft words, but his hands spoke for him. Yana moved with the same strength as before, but she listened more closely to her body. She rested when needed, even when her instincts told her to keep working. This was not weakness to her. It was wisdom. She had seen women of her tribe carry life while facing far worse conditions. Still, this place was new and she remained alert. Their conversations grew longer. Not louder, not dramatic, but fuller. Thomas began asking about her childhood, her people, the songs her mother used to hum while working. Yana shared what she could, though some memories were heavy. She spoke of long walks, shared meals, and the deep connection her people had with the land. Thomas listened carefully, sometimes asking questions, sometimes just absorbing her words. In return, he spoke of his parents, of the accident that took them, and of how he had learned to be alone. He admitted that loneliness had become familiar, almost comforting. Yana listened without interrupting. When he finished, She did not offer comfort he had not asked for. She simply stayed beside him. That was enough. Outside the ranch, whispers grew. Some neighbors questioned the future of the land. Some doubted the child would ever be accepted. Others stayed silent but distant. Thomas noticed every look, every pause in conversation. For the first time in years, he cared what people thought not of him, but of the woman walking beside him. One afternoon, a group of men from town approached the ranch. Their words were polite, but their meaning was not. They spoke of land boundaries, of tradition, of how things had always been. Thomas stood firm, answering calmly. Yana stood slightly behind him, her posture straight, her presence unmistakable. When one man spoke out of turn, Thomas stepped forward, ending the conversation. The men left unsettled. That night, Thomas admitted his fear. He worried that trouble would follow them, that their child would grow up caught between worlds. Yana reminded him that strength often comes from belonging to more than one place. She told him that identity was not something others decided. It was something lived. As the months passed, signs of new life became clearer. The house felt smaller, not because of space, but because of anticipation. Yana began planning quietly, small clothes, simple tools, safe places. Thomas watched, learning. He asked questions he never thought he would ask. What did babies need? How did one teach a child to survive without making them afraid of the world? Yana answered patiently. She told him children learned best by watching, not being told. She told him fear passed down easily, but so did courage. Thomas thought about his own childhood and wondered what he might have done differently if he had known this sooner. One evening, a storm came unexpectedly. Wind tore across the land and rain fell hard and fast. Thomas rushed to secure the animals while Yana stayed inside, steadying herself. The storm felt symbolic, loud and uncertain. When Thomas returned, soaked and tired, Yana handed him dry clothes without a word. He looked at her and realized how much he relied on her presence. Later that night, as thunder rolled in the distance, Thomas admitted something he had not yet faced. He was no longer thinking of the child as an idea or responsibility. He was thinking of it as part of them. Part of the life they were building together. Saying it aloud frightened him, but it also grounded him. Yana smiled softly, the first real smile he had seen from her. It was not loud or dramatic. It was calm, certain. She told him that trust was not built in grand promises, but in moments like this, when fear was shared, not hidden. As winter approached, the ranch changed. Fires burned longer. Meals grew warmer. The world outside slowed. Inside, the bond between them deepened. They did not label it. They did not rush it. They simply lived it. One morning, as Thomas watched Yana walk across the yard, strong even as she carried new life, he realized something quietly important. This marriage, once made from necessity, had become a partnership. Not perfect, not easy, but real. The future was still uncertain. Judgment still waited beyond the fence line. But for the first time, Thomas did not feel alone facing it. And Yana, far from her original home, no longer felt like a guest in this place. They were building something neither world had planned for, something fragile, determined, and alive, growing steadily, day by day. The air felt heavier that spring. The land had begun to green, but tension grew faster than the new grass. Word of the marriage had spread beyond the ranch. Some neighbors whispered behind closed doors, questioning why a cowboy would marry an Apache woman. Others openly stared, their eyes judging, their voices carrying doubt. Thomas tried to ignore them, but he noticed every glance. He had spent years alone, caring little what others thought, but now it felt different. Yana was part of his life, and their unity had become a target. Yana, too, felt the weight of eyes on her. She had faced challenges before, but the open disapproval of strangers carried a sting. She moved through the ranch with her usual calm, yet inside, tension simmered. Her pregnancy, once private and personal, was now a point of gossip. Some people suggested she would never fit, that the child would suffer for its parents' choices. Ayanna refused to let the words touch her, focusing instead on the present, the land, the animals, and the man who had accepted her for who she was. One afternoon, Thomas confronted a man from town who had made a cutting remark while delivering supplies. His voice was low but firm. "This is my home. She is my wife. You will speak no more of judgment here." The man stumbled over his words, caught between anger and respect. He left quietly. Ayanna watched from the porch, her face unreadable, but inside she felt a spark of relief. Thomas was learning to protect them, not with violence but with presence and words. Still, challenges persisted. Some members of Ayanna's tribe grew, worried that she was losing herself in the life of a cowboy. Letters from elders reminded her that her identity must remain strong. They spoke of tradition, of culture, and of the importance of her role in guiding younger members of the tribe. Ayanna read the letters carefully, understanding the wisdom and the worry behind them. She responded respectfully, assuring them that while she embraced her new life, she would never forget her roots. Thomas noticed the care with which she balanced both worlds, admiring her calm confidence. The pregnancy advanced, and with it, new responsibilities arose. Thomas took over chores Ayanna could no longer manage, learning the patience required to care not only for the ranch, but also for the woman he had once seen as distant and untouchable. Early mornings turned into lessons in gentleness. Feeding the animals, mending fences, and preparing meals became acts of mindfulness, a way to show care without needing words. Ayanna noticed the subtle changes in him, how he listened more, how he paused to check on her comfort, how he began to include her in decisions about the ranch. One evening, a sudden thunderstorm swept across the open land. Rain poured in sheets, and the wind shook the weak beams of the barn. Thomas worked tirelessly to secure the animals, while Ayanna stayed inside the house, keeping her calm and steady for the unborn child. The storm reminded them both that life was unpredictable and sometimes harsh. When Thomas returned, drenched and exhausted, Ayanna helped him inside. They shared a quiet meal by candlelight, the storm outside a reminder that they were stronger together than apart. Conflict came in a more personal way when a neighbor openly questioned Thomas about Ayanna's intentions. "Are you sure she isn't using you?" the man asked, suspicion heavy in his voice. Thomas did not answer at first. Then he spoke with quiet determination. "She is no one's scheme, she is my wife. We make our life together and nothing else matters." Ayanna, standing behind him, nodded silently. Together they projected unity, a shield against doubt and prejudice. As time passed, their bond deepened. Simple acts became symbols of trust and partnership. Thomas learned to anticipate Ayanna's needs before she spoke. Ayanna, in turn, found ways to teach him patience, resilience, and quiet understanding. They no longer merely tolerated each other's presence, they relied on it. When she sat to rest, he prepared her space without being asked. When he worked late into the evening, she left food and water for him, leaving small notes of encouragement. The world outside did not soften, but their home did. Within its walls, judgments could not reach them. The unborn child became a symbol of unity and hope. Thomas spoke quietly to the baby sometimes, sharing thoughts of the land, of safety, of resilience. Ayanna, feeling the child move, whispered promises of strength, love, and guidance. They began imagining the future, not as individuals but as a family. Even small dreams, teaching the child to ride, to respect the land, to understand both cultures, became shared plans. Yet even as their connection grew, challenges continued. A traveling merchant arrived with news of further tensions between settlers and local tribes. The risk of conflict reminded them that peace was fragile. Thomas and Ayanna began practicing small precautions, securing the property, learning about the surrounding lands, and planning ways to respond to any danger. It was not fear that motivated them, but a commitment to protect each other and the life growing within Yana. One quiet night, under a sky heavy with stars, Thomas finally voiced what he had long felt but not expressed. "I did not know I could care for someone like this," he said softly. "I thought I would always be alone. Now I don't want to be anywhere else." Yana looked at him, her calm eyes reflecting trust and warmth. She placed her hand on his and said, "You do not have to be alone. We are together. We face it all together." That simple statement carried weight neither of them could measure, yet both felt its truth deeply. Their partnership became a quiet force. Life continued to test them, but each challenge brought them closer. They learned that survival was not merely about strength or endurance. It was about trust, patience, and choosing each other daily. Through judgment, storms, and fear, they had found a rhythm. They were no longer just a cowboy and a brave Apache woman. They were a team, preparing not just for the present but for the future they had chosen together. By the time summer approached, their world had shifted. Neighbors who once whispered began to look at them with quiet respect. Some still doubted, but many observed how the couple faced adversity calmly and united. Yana's pregnancy progressed steadily, and the ranch operated smoothly, thanks to their combined effort. Every small task, feeding animals, planting crops, mending fences, carried a sense of purpose now, a purpose that belonged to them both. One morning, as they worked side by side, a quiet understanding passed between them. They were no longer strangers linked by necessity. They were partners facing the uncertainties of life, bound by trust, respect, and shared responsibility. The journey had been difficult, and it would continue to challenge them, but each challenge was now a step toward something larger than themselves, a life built on choice, courage, and commitment. And so, as the sun rose over the rolling hills, Thomas and Ayana stood together, feeling the strength of their unity. Outside, the world still held judgment and danger, but inside their home, they had found peace. It was not the peace of ease or comfort, but the peace of knowing that together they could face whatever came next. Their family, though not yet fully realized, was already taking shape in trust, care, and the promise of tomorrow. The days grew warmer as summer settled over the ranch, and with each sunrise, life felt fuller, richer, and more purposeful. Yana's pregnancy was now clearly visible, a quiet miracle growing beneath her steady strength. She moved through the house and the land with care, aware of the new life she carried but never letting it slow her spirit. Thomas watched her from a distance at first, then gradually found ways to help that were both practical and thoughtful. Feeding the animals became more than a chore. It became a shared task, a rhythm that connected them not just as partners, but as soon-to-be parents. They had grown so used to the routines of the ranch that the simplest things now carried deep meaning. Yana would rise early to check the small garden behind the house, carefully tending the vegetables and herbs, while Thomas repaired fences or loaded hay. Sometimes, they worked side by side without speaking, letting the quiet of the land be enough. Their silence was no longer tense, it was comforting. Each glance, each gesture became a conversation of its own, and they had learned to understand each other without words. Visitors were now rare, and those who came approached with cautious respect. Some had been skeptical at first, doubting the stability of a cowboy and an Apache woman living together. But seeing the way Thomas and Ayana managed the ranch, cared for one another, and prepared for the child changed opinion slowly. Even people who had once whispered judgment now nodded politely, unsure of how to respond but unable to deny the strength of their unity. Outside criticism existed, as it always would, but it no longer touched them in the same way. They were together, and that was enough. One evening, Thomas and Ayana walked to the top of a small hill behind the house, carrying water and a few simple tools. The sky was painted with orange and pink streaks, the kind of sunset that made even the harsh land feel tender. Thomas paused, looking at Ayanna, noticing the way her hair caught the sunlight, the calm confidence in her stance. He felt an unfamiliar mix of awe and love, though he did not yet name it aloud. Ayanna sensed it, not needing words, and reached for his hand. Their fingers intertwined naturally, an unspoken promise that whatever came, they would face it together. The birth approached slowly, and the preparations became detailed. Thomas built a small cradle from wood he had saved, sanding it smooth and ensuring it was sturdy. Ayanna sorted cloths and blankets, making a clean space for the baby with patience and care. Both of them spoke less about fear and more about the excitement of welcoming new life. The ranch, once quiet and focused solely on survival, now held the hum of expectation. Every sound, the low moo of cattle, the whisper of wind through the trees, seemed to carry a sense of purpose. Finally, the day arrived when the labor began. It was neither dramatic nor frightening, just a steady process that demanded strength and endurance. Thomas stayed close, helping when needed, learning quickly how to offer support without disturbing her focus. Ayanna's calm guided him more than instruction ever could. He marveled at her resilience, realizing that this woman he had once only known as strong and proud was now demonstrating a depth of courage he could not have imagined. Every contraction, every step, every moment became a testament to their shared commitment. When the child finally arrived, it was quiet, small, and perfect. The sound of the baby's first cry filled the house, echoing off the wooden walls and making the silence of the ranch feel alive. Thomas held the child carefully, unsure at first, then finding a natural rhythm in the act. Ayanna rested beside them, exhausted but radiant, her hand on Thomas's arm. There was no ceremony, no fanfare, just the quiet triumph of life and the simple, profound joy of creation. In the days that followed, Thomas and Ayanna settled into a new rhythm. Nights were longer and filled with feeding, cleaning, and comforting the baby. Days were busy with chores, teaching, and observing the child as it slowly discovered the world. Thomas found joy in even the smallest moments: a smile, a coo, a tiny hand grasping his finger. Ayanna moved with grace, her strength tempered by a gentle attentiveness that softened the edges of their rough frontier life. Neighbors who had once doubted now watched in silent admiration. They saw a man and a woman who had come together not out of passion alone, but out of commitment, courage, and care. The child became a symbol of unity, a tangible proof that differences could blend into something strong, nurturing, and beautiful. The ranch itself seemed to flourish under this new energy, crops growing sturdier, animals healthier, and the land seeming to hum with life that reflected their own. As the months passed, Thomas and Ayanna found themselves not only partners but teachers. They guided the child through the basics of survival, the value of respect, and the understanding of both cultures that had shaped its parents. Stories from Ayanna's childhood were shared gently, passing along lessons of courage, tradition, and wisdom. Thomas shared lessons in endurance, responsibility, and quiet observation, teaching the child that strength came in many forms, and that love was often found in everyday care rather than grand gestures. The hardships of the past, the whispers, the judgment, the uncertainty, felt distant now. They had been replaced by trust, love, and the quiet certainty that they could face whatever came together. Thomas often paused to reflect on how far they had come, from strangers bound by necessity to a family united by choice and effort. Ayanna, too, looked at their life with quiet satisfaction, knowing that her strength had not only preserved her identity but had helped build something enduring, something alive. One evening, as the sun set over the horizon, Thomas and Ayanna sat outside, the baby resting safely between them. The wind carried the scent of fresh grass and earth, and the sounds of the ranch blended into a soothing chorus. Thomas held Ayanna's hand, and she rested her head against his shoulder. No words were needed. The life they had built, the child they now shared, and the trust they had developed spoke louder than any sentence could. They had faced judgment, uncertainty, and fear, yet here they were, stronger and more united than ever. Their future was still unwritten, but they no longer feared it. They had learned that love and commitment were not always dramatic or obvious. Sometimes they were quiet, steadfast, and lived in daily choices. They had learned that family was not just blood or tradition, but care, respect, and the courage to face the world together. In that moment, as the stars began to appear one by one, Thomas and Ayanna understood that they had found something rare and powerful, a life built on trust, partnership, and hope. The child, small and curious, stirred in their arms, and Thomas smiled down at it. Ayanna leaned closer, whispering a promise of guidance and love. Together, they looked out over the land they had worked so hard to sustain, a home filled with laughter, care, and quiet strength. They had faced storms, judgment, and the unknown, yet their family had grown resilient, connected, and alive. And in the simplicity of that summer evening, Thomas, Ayanna, and their child found the peace and fulfillment that neither could have imagined when their journey first began. They had started as two people from different worlds, bound by necessity. They had become partners united by trust, and now as parents they were creating something enduring, a family, a legacy, and a life shaped by choice, courage, and love.